All right, so I was scrolling through my Twitter feed the other day and I came across this commercial that apparently was being run on Fox News, and it was pointed out here by Case Study QB, so credit to them for finding this and uploading it so we could watch it. But essentially, you're just going to see this is really just a grift that is being pushed by conservatives as a part of a broader trend that we've been seeing recently to oppose the accurate depictions or teaching of U.S. history, or really anything that could possibly portray the United States in a negative light, and instead trying to essentially indoctrinate children with far-right nationalist garbage. So let's just go ahead and watch this commercial.
Parents and grandparents, are you aware that your children's teachers are brainwashing them with socialist ideals? Help your kids resist the left's sinister agenda with Mike Huckabee's free kids guide to fighting socialism. This important free gift will help kids learn why socialism is bad for America and how they can help fight back. It's part of a free gift bundle that includes a magazine and video lesson. To learn more, just visit kidsfightsocialism.com. That's kidsfightsocialism.com. Parents.
Okay, so unfortunately I couldn't actually find like specific breakdowns of all of the different pieces that are within these little booklets or pamphlets or whatever the fuck you want to call them that former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is apparently trying to grift off of. But you can see here, just from a couple different examples, if you scroll through the different, little outlines that they have here, I mean, it really is just like childishly stupid, like no pun intended, childishly stupid. Like they literally have capitalism is the best, and what do socialists believe? They're so focused on fighting other people, they think that everything is a battle between the rich and the poor. So I guess the message there being that there shouldn't be any conflict between the rich and the poor, and that the poor should simply accept their fate and pull themselves up by their bootstraps until they're a billionaire CEO and fulfill their destiny. But I mean, also down here, capitalism versus socialism, they literally just have capitalism A+, socialism F, and communism F-. I mean, just like seriously the dumbest shit that you could possibly imagine. Nothing substantive, just pure rank propaganda. And again, I mean, socialism is an unfree system. Again, it's just wrong. I mean, at face value, capitalism is an inherently authoritarian system where you have a handful of people who are sitting at the top, at the board of director level, the CEOs, the shareholders, etc., that have a dramatic, disproportionate control over our economy and therefore over power within this country. And it's a massively authoritarian system inherently, just because of the nature of how it works. It's by definition a top-down control over the means of production, a top-down control over the economic structure that we have in this country. Socialism, I would argue, is a much more free system for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, it is empowering workers to be entitled to the full value that their labor is producing and allowing them to have some sort of a democratic say within the place that occupies the vast majority of their waking life in their workplace. So I would argue it's a much more free system, but of course they're just going to simplify this into capitalism good and socialism bad. But this is exactly the type of shit you could expect from a guy like Mike Huckabee. So again, it's really just a grift on top of everything. This isn't something that is seriously being put forward to educate kids in any way, shape, or form. It's just rank propaganda that conservatives are pushing right now, because I guess they have this idea in their head that our public education system is indoctrinating students into being Marxists. And this is really the best part of this to me, is that when I went through school personally, I went to a private school, so I probably had a different experience than people who went to public schools. But everybody that I know in my personal life, the way that we are taught economics, the way that we're taught U.S. history and political differences between socialist countries, communist countries, and capitalist enterprises, etc., we're basically just taught capitalist economics as if that's the eternal default that has existed for all of time, and that it's unchanging and it's the best system we've ever figured out, and nothing really needs to be changed about it. Whereas when I was taught about socialism and communism, it was essentially just taught as like this inherent evil that was defeated by the good United States and our allies, and never to be spoken of again. So I don't really understand even where they're getting this idea that we're being indoctrinated in public schools to become socialists or anything. If anything, it's the exact opposite of that. If anything, we're taught that capitalism and U.S. imperialism are just the way that the world works, and not to question any of that. So I think it's pretty, insane, basically, that conservatives are using this opportunity to try to indoctrinate kids into this far-right nationalism and, hyper-capitalist sentiments, because this is already what is essentially being taught. And if young people are rejecting capitalism, if young people are turning towards socialism and communism for alternative economic models, it's not because they're being indoctrinated into thinking that way. It's because we are directly experiencing, especially people who, graduated at the time of like the '08 financial collapse, or even the most recent financial collapse here in the United States, we're directly experiencing the flaws that exist within a capitalist system when wages are not rising, when, costs keep going up, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in housing, whether it's in any number of things, and wages are not going up, and unions have been decimated. People are just experiencing the downfall of the capitalist system organically, and they're turning to other, ideas as alternatives to that. This isn't something that people are being brainwashed into doing. It's just the reality of the consequences of having a broken capitalist system as we do here in the United States. So, if anything, I guess keep grasping at straws and hoping that younger generations believe this bullshit. I highly doubt it. There's a reason why younger generations are rejecting this, but, I guess if you want to go and order yourself this, here's the website. You want to go check out what else Mike Huckabee has to push out here. But I told you guys I was going to try to connect this to a broader trend that we have been seeing recently, because, yeah, it's pretty funny to just watch these stupid advertisements and make fun of them and shit, but this is actually being, implemented, or these ideas are being implemented within laws all around the United States. So just as a reminder here from Al Jazeera, they say, conservative book bans are part of the GOP's fascist turn, and this is Christopher Rhodes, and he says, for the past few years, conservatives have been waging an insidious and disingenuous campaign to whitewash racism and oppression from American history and censor material that would examine the more sordid parts of America's past and present. And they say the same GOP politicians and pundits that attacked the 1619 Project and then took critical race theory, a graduate level framework for examining the racial biases embedded in the American legal, political, and social institutions, and falsely painted it as a subversive ideology infiltrating grade school curriculum. According to Education Week, since January of 2021, 36 states have passed or proposed legislation to restrict teaching related to race and racism. So again, you see what the actual, agenda is here. It's not just to grift and try to make some money off of some random kids book sales. It's also shit like this. It's actually restricting what kids are being taught in schools so that they aren't exposed to the actual history of the United States, and therefore aren't exposed to the continued existing problems that do in fact exist and are real within our institutions to this day. And I just covered in my video earlier today about Ted Cruz pushing the Ketanji Brown Jackson on her previous school board position and during these Senate confirmation hearings, and basically trying to imply that she was pushing this hidden CRT agenda that is counter to what MLK believed. And essentially his main point was the same point that's being made by that advertisement that they just watched, and basically just trying to portray MLK's beliefs as if he believed that we should just pretend that racism doesn't exist, and that any racism that does exist today is a result of personal individual failings instead of systemic structures that still exist within society. It's again just part of the classic conservative playbook of pretending everything is individualistic and there are no overarching structures within society that could possibly be confronted or addressed or remodeled to be more equitable and fair. They just want you to focus on individualism, both from an economic perspective and clearly from a racial perspective. But they continue saying that national organizations have coordinated cross-state efforts distributing lists of books to ban, and these laws and regulations have led to books being removed from libraries, educators being fired, and even threats of civil and criminal charges for librarians and educators who share the now forbidden topics. And they say in isolation, the demonizing of the 1619 Project and critical race theory followed a familiar conservative playbook. First, take a term with specific meaning, redefine that term through rhetoric and propaganda into something scary and dangerous, misapply the term to a much broader set of ideas than it actually encompasses, and use the new demonized concept to discredit political opponents or groups of people associated with these ideas. And he says, through the use of this tactic at various points in American history, all socialists or simply, left-leaning politicians and activists became violent, godless communist Marxists, feminists became man-hating liberals, or man-hating radicals, Black Lives Matter became violent white hatred, and inclusivity and wokeness became political correctness and thought policing, and now critical race theory has been disingenuously transformed into reverse racism, divisiveness, black supremacy, and to come full circle, Marxism. So again, we see this, in the modern day right now. We see even guys like Joe Biden being portrayed as if he's somehow a socialist or a radical communist or something like that. Even a guy like Bernie Sanders, who is nominally the most left, congressional representative that we have right now, even he is a democratic socialist. He's not even a real socialist. So, we don't even have this existing within our political realm right now, in the same way that we don't have real, CRT ideals being taught to elementary school kids, in the same way that we don't have, socialist indoctrination within our public schools. Again, it's all just made up bullshit. These are complete non-issues that don't actually exist in society right now, but conservatives are weaponizing this narrative that they've managed to craft and form to basically push us in a much more reactionary right-wing direction. And it's pretty obvious what they're doing, but on the other hand, it's also working, because again, you've seen this in 36 different states, legislation either being passed or proposed within these state legislatures to restrict the education of young people towards a much more right-wing nationalist direction. So it is going to have consequences, even though ads like that are pretty stupid and laughable. This is going to have consequences, and this is something that we're going to have to continue pushing back against, or else kids are actually not going to be able to be exposed to even mildly left-wing ideas, let alone socialism or communism or anarchism or any other actual left-wing policies and frameworks to look at the world.